Monday, March 22nd, and the pandemic rages on. I'm sitting down to have a nice glass of Scotch, a Dram as they say, and I thought, what a great time to share with you 5 interesting things about Scotch. Now, Scotch is whiskey that was distilled and aged in Scotland, and the word whiskey, is derived from the Gaelic Vushkabaha, which is water of life, whiskey. So the first thing I want to talk about is blended versus single malt scotches. Now, a blended scotch is made up of whiskies that were all distilled in Scotland. That's why it's Scotch, but it's different distilleries from across the country. A single malt scotch is still a blend of whiskies, but all of the whiskies in it were blended from the same distillery. They were all distilled at the same place. So up until about the 1960s, all single malts were distilled for the purpose of blending. And then I believe it was Glenfiddich really popularized the single malt process as a global export. Second thing we'll talk about is the age. So the age on the bottle represents the youngest whiskey in the mix or in the blend. So in a 12-year Scotch, you may have elements that were aged longer, 14 years, 18 years, but the youngest whiskey in the blend is 12 years, and so the Scotch is a 12-year Scotch. Third thing we'll talk about is evaporation. Now, every cask loses about 2% of its volume to evaporation annually, right? So a whiskey that's been aged 14 years has lost about 25% of its volume. So there's literally less supply, less of the product available, and that drives up the cost. So you'll find older scotches tend to be more expensive. There's less available from the product that you started with, right? It should be noted, older scotches are not always better scotches. Often they are, but not always. Third thing that we'll talk about is taxes, because, I just find taxes interesting. So to me, interestingly, it can actually be cheaper to purchase Scotch outside of Scotland than inside. Now, the reason for that is that the UK whiskey tax is 70% flat rate. So particularly for more expensive scotches, you're probably better off just waiting and buying it post-export, right? And that wraps up into the fifth point, which is exports. Scotch accounted for 4.7 billion euros in total revenue in 2018, so annually, for over 4 billion annually, let's say. The industry employs 42,000 people. That includes 10,500 directly employed in Scotland, including 7,000 rural area jobs. So from me to the farmers and the distillers and the blenders and the bottlers, thank you. And by all means, keep it coming.